Hello, and welcome to today's National 8A Association September 2022 webinar. I am Haley Bingham, the Deputy Executive Director for the National 8A Association. The National 8A Association is a nonprofit with a mission to provide education and guidance for all aspiring, current, and graduate 8As. We are also proud to work with all types of minority businesses, HubZone, veteran-owned, women-owned, JVs, agencies, large primes, and industry professionals. Before we begin, I'd like to note that this webinar is being recorded and all presentation materials will be posted on our website. If you would like to ask a question, please use the chat box and select everyone or email us at events@national8aassociation.org. I'd now like to introduce you to today's speaker, Rich Wilkinson, the Senior Industry Director for GovCon for Unanet. Please join me in welcoming Rich as he gives us a sneak peek at the 2022 Gauge Report. Welcome, Rich.
Welcome, everyone. I've been around GovCon for way too long, it seems like. I started out as a Navy contracting officer for 8 years and then spent 10 years in the controllership of various services companies around the Washington area, from small to rather large. And then I joined the software world, and I've been doing software for government contractors for more than 25 years now, almost 30, in fact. The Gauge Report is based on a survey that we do at Unanet every year. It's now in its 6th year, and each year the Gauge is theme-based. This year the theme is reimagining how we work, which seemed to be appropriate coming out of the pandemic, if in fact we are coming out now. The Gauge is value-based and permits benchmarking of your organization against other companies that are out there, companies in your NAICS code, companies of your same size, even companies in your same socioeconomic category, such as 8A or woman-owned. It gives us a little bit of a crystal ball, and we break it down into 5 different categories. The responses from this year were pretty much as you would expect, but we'd like to take a quick look back at 2021, and this will be very short because I only have really about 18, 19 minutes today. Last year, our theme was creating a winning proposal, and some of the surprises that came out of that for us was that 56% of GovCons made less than 10% profit. Organic growth was their single largest financial challenge, and increasing competition was a top concern. Now, those might not seem all that unusual, but as we go through this year's results, I will be contrasting last year's results with this year's. We also discovered last year that almost half of all our GovCon respondents did not have a structured capture or gate process for their pursuits. We also discovered that 75% of all of our respondents were winning less than half the time. It's not as bad as it sounds, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes when we get into the 2022 results. More important, though, almost 2/3 of all of our respondents said that they were not improving their win rate year over year. And, as a company grows, they really should be. From last year's 2021 report, the real takeaways were, in order to win, you have to understand the competition, you have to understand the customer, but almost as important as either one of those, you have to understand yourself. And that's really where the Gauge survey comes in. We give you a way to benchmark yourself against the competition, or for that matter, your partners, and really understand your issues, your challenges, and your strengths. The 2021 report is still available for about another week. If you point your mobile device at the QR code on the screen right now, it'll take you straight to a place where you can download the 2021 report. It'll still be available once the 2022 report is issued in about a week, but it'll be a different link. I'm not suggesting you go there now and do it. Just point your camera at the QR code and bookmark that spot so you can go back to it a little later. You know, the pressures on our industry this year are different than they've been probably in my experience throughout my career. We've got new things on the horizon. We have new things in our rearview mirror, and they're all over the map. Oh, before I forget, GAGE is an acronym. You knew it was going to be, right? It's GovCon. It has to be an acronym. I think it's actually required by law. So the G, we had to stretch a little bit to get that initial G. That's government contract compliance. The A is accounting, the U is utilization, G for growth, and E for efficiencies. This year's respondents were heavily from the C-suite of the companies that responded to our survey. 30% president or CEO and another 23% from the CFO. We actually consider the controller to be so inextricably bound to the C-suite, they might as well be called a chief something officer, chief accounting officer maybe. And about 12% of our respondents were in that category. Other C-suites, another 7%. And that's the overwhelming majority of all of our respondents, though we did have representation pretty much across the rest of the companies. We broke our respondents this year into revenue bands, as we always have, but we did add an extra band at the top this year just to isolate the largest of the companies. For this year, for the first time, we also broke things apart by size. And you'll notice a really interesting thing. This is dominated by smaller businesses. 1 to 99 employees was 58% of our respondents. I will point out, though, this is actual employees because of the way we asked this question. I think we'll modify this question next year because this did not count subcontractor individuals in the company's workforce, and probably should if you're really looking at size. We looked at portfolio composition of contracts and vehicles, and it's no real surprise, I guess, about half of revenue is coming from individual awards. I will point out, though, that all of those other selections there, IDIQ, BPA, GWACs, all the others, they're all forms of IDIQs of one description or another. So in reality, the takeaway here is that in 2022, it was about 50-50, IDIQs and individual contracts. We get the sort of the impression these days that we're living in an IDIQ world dominated by delivery orders, but it's not completely true, I think. You know, GovCons in general are very optimistic. They're an optimistic bunch of people. If you look at the average there, we have a total of 68%, either very optimistic or cautiously optimistic. And that's in contrast to some of the other slides here in a minute. Another question we asked this year, and this was very much in keeping with our theme, was how has the work environment for the last couple of years affected where you work? Let's see, what's that? 69% of our respondents said they had adopted either a fully remote or a hybrid work from home policy over the last year. Now, there's actually two bars there because our partner in this study, CohnReznick, is a CPA firm. They do a lot of tax work, and they were very interested in whether people were tracking this for state tax purposes. And it was about half and half, 36% versus 33%. But you really need to add those two together for 69% to see the real impact of remote work policies in our industry. And it varied a little bit by revenue band, but frankly, not that much. For the first time this year, when we asked the perennial question, what keeps you up at night? Resource, recruiting, and retention bubble to the top of the list. It's never been in the top 3 before, much less at the top of the list. And this year, it's number 1. We think we know why. I'll get to that in just a minute. Of course, competition for contracts is always in the top 3. It was number 2 last year, but this year, resource, recruiting, and retention pushed it down to number 3. We asked people to give us an opinion. This one's strictly an opinion on their compensation plans. And you'll notice here in areas like paid time off, 401k, and medical insurance, the overwhelming majority of the companies, 63, 55, and 59% respectively, said that they were either very competitive or competitive. In just a minute, I'm going to show you some information about fringe rates that's going to contrast with this rather significantly. Hold on for that. We ask about impacts on the company, and this is a really interesting graph. I encourage you to download this deck after the presentation and take a hard look at this one, because there are some really interesting things buried in here. The first bar and the last bar really stood out to me. First of all, what was that? 65% plus 31%. So 96% of our respondents said things had either gotten better or it had no impact associated with a hybrid work model or a remote work policy. By the same token, look at the bottom one, recruiting and maintaining staff. Half of all of our respondents said it had gotten worse since the pandemic. That third bar I thought was kind of interesting too. Time it takes to get work done. Some of us in the industry, not necessarily myself, but some of the people I talk to, or a hybrid work policy has been detrimental to getting work done, and our respondents did not agree with that. 60% said it had no impact, and another 27% said it had actually gotten better since the pandemic. I thought that was a really interesting finding. We ask about PTO, paid time off, paid absence, and it shouldn't be any surprise. Almost 80%, 8 out of 10 of our respondents said they base their PTO on a standard accrual based on the standard hours in the year. That's pretty traditional for a GovCon. I will point out, though, that unlimited PTO bubble, even though it's only 12%, is a growing trend among companies, but not so much among GovCons as the rest of industry. In the compliance area, we ask about business systems because business systems have been a real issue over the last few years. And it's probably no surprise that first bar there, accounting systems, over a third of our respondents said they always see accounting systems either as a requirement or offered as points in this evaluation scheme for solicitations. And another, almost 1/3, said it was frequent. So that's 2/3 of our respondents that said they either always or often see accounting systems, an approved accounting system, as a requirement in solicitations. We thought that was fairly interesting, but not really surprising. What was surprising was that the other systems, purchasing, estimating, government property, even earned value, are so seldom seen as a requirement or as a frequently seen item in solicitations. Now, it may be that we have a heightened awareness of this because the solicitations that do have a requirement or offer points are big ones, like CIO SP4. That one offered points for all of them except accounting, and it actually required accounting. We ask about CMMC. I don't think there's been a survey or a slide deck in the last 3 years that hasn't had CMMC in it somewhere. This one's no different. Just over a quarter of our respondents said that they would probably be at level 2, but an equal number just didn't know. That's a little bit distressing, frankly. We ask about DCAA audits. We do every year. About a quarter of our respondents said they had an incurred cost audit last year. And another quarter said they had almost a quarter said they had an accounting system audit, either a pre-award survey or a post-award audit. Those are really the same thing. They vary in their depth and when they're done, but the result of either one of those audits or reviews is an acceptance of the accounting system. We ask about audit challenges. And this year, for the first time, adequate business systems bubbled up into the top 3. The top three for all 6 surveys have been rates, timekeeping, and billing. They sometimes swap the number 1 and number 2 slots around. Number 1, 2, and 3, though, have always been those 3. This year, for the first time, adequate business systems displaced billing in the top 3. You know, cash is king in GovCon. DSO is everything. What's significant here is the change over time. Since 2018, when only 28% of our respondents said they collected their cash in 30 days or less, this year it's what, 41%. You got to add those 2 bars, bottom bars together in the last column. 41% said they collected their cash in 30 days or less, and 14% said they got it in less than 15 days. That's actually outstanding. We're not sure what's causing the decrease in DSO. It's a good trend, but we're not sure exactly what's causing it. We'd like to think it's the prevalence of automated accounting systems like Unanet that not only speed invoice production, but also reduce error rates, because that's a real killer in DSO. We ask about financial challenges, and there's no real surprise here, except that benefit parity creeped onto the list for the first time this year. Organic growth is still number 1, and the uncertainty of federal spending, though, that contrasts a little bit with the optimism that GovCons all have about our industry. Indirect cost, healthcare and facilities are still the top 2. And I'm not going to spend any time here, but this slide is worth downloading and taking a look at it. In the utilization area, project management challenges we ask about and resource management for the first time was number 1. And of course, resources in our business are people. Our resources are our employees. And so what we're really talking about there with that top bar is recruiting and retention. And that was almost 60%, either the first or second issue for our respondents. We asked them about human resources challenges separately, and here recruiting and retention were the top 2. And look at the score there in recruiting. 70% of our respondents identified that as either their number 1 or number 2 human resources challenge. I'm a little bit surprised, frankly, that retention didn't score nearly as highly as recruiting, especially given some of the other findings. We asked people what they expected to see change in their workforce. And yeah, it's not a big surprise, but we were a little bit interested that companies that expected to grow significantly have decreased steadily for the last 4 years. And companies that expected to remain the same have increased steadily over that same time. The upper and lower bounds didn't change much at all. It's just those grow significantly and remain the same lines that are converging. Resource consumption, this is another one of those slides where you really need to download the slide and study it to get out of this what you can. But this one's really useful for benchmarking your staffing against other companies of your size or your employee size. When the full report comes out, there's an additional table in the full report that lets you do the same thing by NAICS code. Everybody is struggling a little bit with square footage. About half of our respondents reported changes as a result of the pandemic. About half either reported a decrease or a repurposing of square footage. And this goes hand in hand with that trend toward remote work or hybrid work arrangements. We asked people, and we did this for the first time last year, we did it again this year, and the results are roughly the same. Personal relationships are still the number 1 method for finding new opportunities. A little bit surprising, in contracting officer school, they tell you that GovCon is a level playing field and everybody has the same opportunities. Don't believe it for a second. Personal relationship is by far the number 1 way of finding new opportunities. We ask about win rates, and there are no real surprises there. I want to get to my last slide, so I'm going to let you download the deck and take a look at those in some detail. Changes to the indirect rate structure have changed significantly for a lot of our respondents in each of the last 3 years. That was a little bit of a surprise to us too. Frankly, a lot of those changes are companies who are folding their offsite and onsite pools back together, having separated them at some point in their history because their customers or company site personnel pool has fallen below critical mass. It's no longer enough people to justify a separate pool. We ask about grants versus contracts, and I'll let you download the thing and study this one. We always ask a question about indirect rates, and this is the one that really surprised us. We were hoping against hope that that fringe rate number there that you see on average, 26%, was some sort of data problem or an anomaly. And we were even more surprised when you look at it by revenue band or by employee size. The smallest firms are reporting a 20 to 22% fringe rate. Now, payroll taxes is about 11%. Paid absence is 9 to 10, depending on how many days off you give and so forth. That's 20 or 21% all by itself. What that tells us is that the smaller companies aren't offering any health insurance, 401k match, life insurance, short-term disability, long-term disability, or any of the other things that companies truly see or employees actually see as a benefit separate from payroll taxes. I think we may have put our finger a little bit on the recruiting and retention problem. And I don't have the year over year slide in here. It is in the full report, but I can tell you that this is not a 1 year issue. This is a steady 4 year decline in fringes from over 30% 4 years ago to around 20 to 22 for the smaller firms this year. And frankly, it's a little bit of a mystery why this is happening, given the emphasis on recruiting and retention. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I know I'm running a minute or two over, but if there are questions we can answer, I'd love to address them. And if not, look forward to the slide deck being posted on the National 8A website. Feel free to download it and come see us at unanet.com for a full copy of the report, where I had about 20 or so slides in here, graphs. There are probably 60 or more in the full report. And in the full report, there's a link to a benchmarking site where you can go enter your NAICS code or your size band or a head count and benchmark yourself against other companies of your size or your revenue or your NAICS code. Haley?
Yes, thank you so much, Rich, for such an insightful presentation. If anyone has any questions for Rich, you can definitely contact him directly or contact our event team, and we are happy to put you in contact with him. As a reminder, the webinar recording and presentation, as Rich noted, will be posted on our website along with other past webinars by the end of the week. We also have some additional resources that are available, including our upcoming conferences and partner events. Make sure to look into our 2023 National Small Business Conference that's going to be held February 13th to the 15th of 2023. We actually just launched that registration a couple weeks ago. So there's, tons of networking and education. And, we're excited to be back in New Orleans, and early bird registration will only be open for a couple more weeks. So definitely take a look at that. If you have any additional questions on anything covered on today's webinar, please definitely feel free to contact us. Thank you again for joining us, and this concludes today's webinar. We hope that you'll join us next month. Have a great day. Goodbye.